Saved message.
Hey y'all, it's Miranda. Happy January and Happy New Year's. Also, happy finale for this 1 year long of doing 5 artists in every month. It's definitely a bittersweet feeling because I'm of course really sad that I won't be doing, 5 artists every single month for another year. The point of this whole series really was to get myself more well immersed in different artists and get really familiar with the culture and the history of the artists before so that I can have a really nice foundation and set of inspirations for whenever I do continue to make my own art and be my own artist as well. It's a really interesting feeling to have this complete and to look back because of everything that I was kind of going through in this past year, even the 2 years before. Um, Everything kind of has a storyline of what was going on with myself, and then of course with each artist that I was discovering and learning from, a lot of parallels came up, and that was interesting for me to kind of relate to and use as an inspiration and a motivation to continue to get to this point, to the new year. So really inspiring stuff overall, even though it was a really difficult challenge and a really difficult journey, if you will. And I really think the biggest lesson that I've learned from doing this project of a whole year of getting to know artists every month is that there's always a story that you can learn from. There's always someone that you can listen to and get to know that will influence you in some way and give you your own inspirations, your own stories, your own outlook on what's come before and how can you kind of apply that to your own life and how can your journey turn out differently because you've been impacted by somebody else's story? Overall, it's just been very rewarding, this whole entire project and this journey that I'm on with discovering all these artists. So I will continue to do that just on my own time. I took a long time to put and curate this particular 5 listings of artists. So here we go. Let's just get right into it. Alrighty, so our fifth to final January artist of the whole year is a Japanese artist who was based in New York and still is based in New York and who has made things so unconventionally in a really beautiful way. And this particular Japanese contemporary New York artist is of course Ushio Shinohara. He is a very unique and unconventional artist indeed. A sculptor really, a painter considered, a performer, of course, for his box paintings. That is where I discovered him. I was at my old day job in Dallas, and the first thing I saw was an article based off of his artworks and an installation they had of a lot of his sculptures. And I instantly felt connected to this particular artist, seeing the movements in the photos, even of him doing his box paintings, and then of course seeing his sculptures, which I find a lot of inspiration from in terms of just the unconventional color schemes, the textures, the shapes, the free-form freedom of his work. I think the biggest thing for me is that his work feels very free. He is trying to portray something completely his own, completely passionate in what he's trying to convey in his message and his artwork. And to me, he absolutely translates on the page whenever I see his pieces. I wish one day I could actually go see one of his pieces in person. Even more so, go see him do one of his performances, one of his box painting performances. A lot of the research that I did on him kind of conveyed that he really stood by this destruction, unconventional aspect and style of artwork. This idea of let's strip everything down, literally destroy this idea of traditional art and rebuild it into something that's unique. And I find all of that to be so exciting, so refreshing. It just feels like something has been lifted, a weight has been lifted off the feeling like everything has to be so traditional, so classic, so specifically a style that has always been accepted. But now there's this artist who has taken things, stripped it away, destroyed it all, and rebuilt it from his own hands, his own body. He's created this new idea of what it means to be an artist, what it means to create, and what it means to see something beautiful in a totally different way. I'll never forget that moment of seeing that article on the counter and seeing all his work. That was only days before I was about to leave and restart my whole entire life and leave this life that I had built in Dallas. So I really hold him close in regards to change and destruction to build something up again in a really beautiful way that may not be conventional, but is my own. And that's really my whole takeaway from getting to know this artist in particular. Really love him a lot.
If it's a broken heart, then face it.
Now on to the fourth to final artist on my January listing for the entire rest of the year is a particular Italian contemporary artist who of course was also really well known in New York and actually had a lot of connections with the particular artist of that time, who had a lot of recognition for their uniqueness and their freeform ideals. And this particular Italian New York artist is of course Francesco Clemente. He is a very traditional but unique and abstracted artist. And a lot of his artwork had the inspirations of the cultures around him that he really admired, that he was even a part of. For example, the Indian culture, the Italian culture, and of course New York culture as well. Being known, of course, for his paintings, he was also well versed in drawings, doing mosaics, doing frescoes, different graphics, using oils, of course, in his paintings, and a lot of different sculptures and other mixed media ideals. He did a lot of collaborations, like I said, with his fellow colleagues and artists at the time, such as Warhol and Basquiat. Really cool to see these connections and these journeys that have crossed paths between these artists, especially when it comes to that particular period in New York City where that movement was so impactful and is a big reason why I am an artist, and a lot of the artworks that came from that movement from these artists are the reasons why I do art. So really cool that he actually got to know a lot of these artists personally and did a lot of collaborations, and they really inspired each other and worked off each other in a lot of great ways. So really cool to find that out in my research. Overall, this artist gives me a lot of those reminiscences of my own connection to Italian culture, the passion, the versatile nature of it, the overall beauty and freeform ideals of his figures, and the movements really are what capture me the most. The portraits, the eyes, those are the biggest thing for me in general when it comes to art and in life personally. So to see a lot of his work that has that capturing essence of these eyes that are just bringing you in instantly to his pieces, and overall I can really appreciate him because he had such a specific place in this particular time of art and these particular moments and movements and genres that were occurring. He's really a staple when it comes to New York art, and I hold him very high in regard to inspiration and top tier iconic artistry. My third to final artist on my list is an African Native American sculptor who is a very unique and special protected artist within history because a lot of her work had such a huge impact on what she was portraying at the time that she was creating, and she really broke down a lot of barriers in terms of what was restraining her from creating her art and the oppressions and the obstacles she had to overcome. And this particular internationally acclaimed African-American sculptor and well-renowned artist overall is of course Mary Edmonia Lewis. She spent a majority of her career and her lifetime developing her skills within Rome and becoming one of the first pro sculptors of the US, and like I said earlier, becoming internationally acclaimed all around the world in regards to what she was doing sculpturally. Her sculptures were not only so professionally done and so skillfully gorgeous, but she was breaking down these ideals of gender norms and racial roles. She really used her art as an avenue and a means to tell stories of Indigenous women and the cultural beauty of international reverence and overall power that she could give these particular figures in these sculptures. She was able to portray these beautiful stories and beautiful figures. Such an inspiration to see that she was not only so renowned to break down barriers of her own to be appreciated as the professional, hyper-skilled artist that she was, but to then take that and give a voice to herself, give a voice to people all around the world that otherwise would not have been able to be appreciated if she didn't have that avenue of breaking into traditional, professional, admirable art. Such a great artist and a great story, and yeah, I definitely would recommend if you're able to see one of her pieces somewhere out there, do it, take pictures, admire it, and look all around it, because that's exactly what I would do if I saw one of her pieces. Continuing now on to my second to final artist on my January listing for the rest of the year is another New York-based artist from the Bronx. He's an artist similar to Lewis who created sculptures in a really culturally specific and historically impactful way. He really broke down a lot of barriers of his own right in a way that really challenges any stereotypes or particular roles that are put onto individuals of these categories. And this particular Bronx sculpting artist is, of course, Fred Wilson. He is definitely inspired by a lot of the cultural aspects of where he comes from, European descent, African American to Native descent, and beautiful aspects to his heritage that he's presented within his sculptures. And he's definitely taken a lot of these traditional roles, these traditional norms, and reframed them, representing them in a brand new light, a beautiful light, and having a lot of visual questions occur whenever you do view his work. Similar to Mary Lewis, breaking down a lot of barriers, breaking down a lot of these stereotypes, and creating something beautiful in a brand new light that really only someone like this particular artist like Fred could do. And I find that to be, again, super inspiring and awe-striking to see in a modern day light, and a newfound style and the eyes of his own artistry and the eyes of his own visuals and ideals of these figures. And I find that to be so refreshing to kind of break down and deconstruct those ideas, similar to Ushio, creating a new view of what it means to view these figures, what it means to understand culture, what it means to understand heritage. He gives this idea of representation an entirely new aspect, and he is ever inspiring to me in terms of my own personal culture and how I can pertain to what it means to change an outlook, change a personality, a story, to show a beautiful light of it and give somebody a new idea of what it means to understand and appreciate culture. Overall, I find him to be a very symbolic and true to himself artist who has such an impact of what he can tell in terms of his own culture, his own heritage, and stories of all kinds. Okay, and my final artist of January and the entire rest of the year of doing 5 top artists of every month is an artist who is not only positive in terms of the subject matter that she wanted to portray, but a very impactful and unique photographer, visualist, if that is even a word, visualizer really, an artist of her own right. And this particular American sensually visual artist is, of course, Marilyn Minter, who creates these artworks, these photos, these visuals that are capturing. They really give you an instant sense of an understanding of what she may be trying to portray. A lot of sex positivity, a lot of self-awareness and self-discovery, really. Her photos really blur the lines between realistic and stylistic and surrealistic. These photos have a lot of different editing aspects to them that give them those visuals that is so special and unique to her technique. And whenever I see her work, it is undeniable that that is true, because I can just tell right away there's so much depth, there's so much perspective and layering to her work. I think for me to describe her as one word would be layered. An artist that has multiple different aspects and depths to what she does in her work. Not only does her style have these reminiscence of commercial ideals, but has very fine art aspects to them too. You can tell just how much work and how much of these layers are thought through, and each one has a precious, passionate touch to them. When you might first glance at them really quickly, it does give you that instant sexual, sensual visual, but then when you really look at them closer, you get more of that passion, you get more of those understandings of what details she wants to show and how the overall vision really comes together from really complex ideals rather than just a simple surface level, one layered kind of technique. And overall, I find her to be very fun, very freeing, very inspiring, of course, and very punctually exciting. And with that final artist, that completes my entire project and my entire series of doing 5 top artists of every single month for an entire year. I am kind of like in a shock in a way, but also extremely excited to have this done. And when I came up with this idea in February, I really didn't give much thought to just how much work it was going to be and how long the year was going to feel, because every single month I would have to create these really in-depth research-based videos. I'm still at the end of that now, realizing just how thankful and grateful I am that I didn't even realize how much of a challenge it would be, because now coming out of it, I feel extremely accomplished and extremely warm and fuzzy that I have all of these artists to now look at as inspirations. And now I get to know, whenever I go to a gallery, whenever I see an artwork anywhere, I know exactly who it is, and it feels really good to be a part of the community even more than before. Now I have such a respect and such an honorable understanding and outlook on all different types of artists. There's so many out there, and like I said in the beginning, there's many more that I couldn't even include into this list, or it would have been way too many, hundreds and thousands, that I may seriously consider doing this again in the far future for another whole year, or maybe just every once in a while I'll just do like a 5 top artists for any particular month I'm feeling. So I might actually do that instead now that I actually say it out loud. But yeah, I'm really happy to have this done. Thank you guys so much for watching. I usually rip up my listings, but I'm almost like, should I keep this last one? I don't know. I hope this had its own inspiring aspect to it in terms of just try and research as much as you can about other artists, because there's so many great stories out there to learn from that will really help you and impact your own story. Because I feel like myself, I can say I've been very lost for quite a while, even into when I was going to art school. I had no idea what I was going to be, who I was going to be in general, let alone in terms of my art. Definitely consider just taking a minute and doing something like this, but just, you know, gathering a list of artists that you just want to sit down and get to know. There's tons of documentaries out there. A lot of these artists, from the stories I learned, were from watching documentaries and articles and interviews, and even just physically going to galleries and seeing tours, seeing different showcases, and just seeing these pieces in person. There's nothing better than doing that, honestly. It's one thing to do research in books and classrooms and internet research, social media research, but when you actually go to these gallery spaces and these showcase areas and see these artworks in person, to me it feels like meeting celebrities in person. If anything, it could really give fellow artists and just any visual people in general that personal touch to what it means to be an artist and what that artist is trying to portray. So definitely get out there and try and just see these galleries, see these spaces where there's artwork, and have an appreciation for it as best as you can. That's definitely taken me, obviously, this whole year of sitting down and doing this project to really appreciate it, and I'll continue to do that. So I really think that's the biggest thing I can take away from this entire project, is just always be open to understanding and getting to know a new story. There's always someone to learn something from, and there's a lot of great inspiration out there. So try and keep your ears and eyes open to that. All right, and that is it. I really appreciate you guys watching. Have a good one. Happy New Year. Be nice, stay inspired, and support your local artist. Definitely, first and foremost. Okay, bye y'all.